my partner and co-host. Eric, how are you?
Good, thanks, Rob. Glad to have you back.
Thank you,
So,
boss. Looks like a good talk today, so I'm going to leave it to you and go get them.
absolutely, we have a really intriguing show lined up for you all today. We are welcoming the venerable Kate Miller, co-founder and CEO of the cannabis brand Miss Grass. Come on in, Kate. Um, so Yes, great story here we got lined up. Kate, before we dive into your model and what you're doing and how you're doing it, which I think is really innovative, give our listeners a little bit of a background on the how, the why, the when you launched Miss Grass, and then bring us up to speed on where you are today.
Yeah, and first of all, thank you for having me. This will be a fun one. And it was so good to see you last week at Benzinga. So yes, Miss Grass launched in January of 2018. So we're just shy of 6.5 years old. The roots of Miss Grass were planted probably long before then. It dates back to my first legal experience in the industry in 2007, 2008. I was working as a medical bud tender in the California market. I was attending college out in LA. I'm a Jersey girl, so moved out west for school. And back then, especially, obviously, the industry looked a lot different then, but there was, at that time, there were very few brands that even existed to begin with, but very few brands or services that I felt really represented myself or the many people in my life that had a relationship with cannabis that was much more conscious than how it was portrayed at that time. Planted the seed for Miss Grass, bought the URL in 2008, missgrass.com, and ultimately sat on it for a decade until I had a career in the entertainment industry and waited for some meaningful legalization to happen before I decided to devote my life to cannabis, which now I still question, was I a little too early in that? But, we launched in January of 2018 with the same mission that was vision that was planted back in 2008 to really create a brand that authentically represented myself and so many consumers that, we call them more conscious consumers, and to create a safe space, particularly for women to come, educate, learn, share, and celebrate the femininity of this plant.
Awesome. And so fast forward 2018. By the way, the New Jersey to California thing, we're in the same book. We're in the same boat there. So the fast forward to today, how many states are, where are you? And just give our listeners a brief overview.
Yeah, so when we launched, I should say, we did not launch with product. We took a bit of a different approach than the majority of brands in this space. We knew that to create a really valuable brand, we needed to own a loyal and nationwide and even global community. So given the state-by-state rollout that cannabis legalization is in this country, we decided to start as an online media platform, which we still have, an online magazine, which we've created thousands of mainly editorial pieces of content from ranging from educational topics to, the science of cannabis, the history of cannabis, holding hands with different, advocates and thought leaders in the space to amplify their story. And that media platform really allowed us to scale what now is one of the largest brand-owned communities in cannabis. And then not only was that really valuable, it allowed us access to our community and first-party data to really understand like what our community wants, what they're buying, when they're smoking, what they're, why they're consuming, and we use all of that data to inform what eventually became our first product, which wasn't until like 2.5 years after we launched the brand. So we launched Miss Grass Minis, which are our first and hero product. They're mini packs of pre-rolled joints, really informed by the community that we built. Launched in the California market and have expanded into 6 different markets. So we currently operate in, and I should say sell our product in California, Arizona, Illinois, which I'm in Arizona right now. This is my beautiful Marriott hotel. Arizona, Massachusetts, Illinois, New York, and New Jersey. So 6 markets.
Wow. So you started with a media platform to kind of create community, to engage the market, to listen, to understand, right? In terms of what their interests were. What's been the progression of that launch compared to where you are today? You seem to, you launched as a media company. You feel like a little bit more of a product brand today. So there's been a transition, but what has been the kind of the evolution of that model, and how did you, was it, strategically pivoting to product once you knew what the community wanted, or is it just kind of, are they intertwined at this point?
Very much intertwined. I mean, especially in cannabis where, we're restricted in terms of the marketing channels that we can participate in. This is an ingrained, pretty massive marketing engine that fuels the growth and the success and monetization of the brand, which is the product extension. So it was always kind of it was always in the plan. I mean, our first deck of what Miss Grass is, even before we launched the media platform in January 2018, it was build community through this online, channel. And we did a lot of partnerships and events and things offline as well at the time, and still do a lot of that, to capture a ton of first party data, use data to inform what became our product. That first deck had all of that happening within the first 6 to 12 months of the business. It took, about 2.5 years to get to a point where it made sense for us from a financial perspective, from having enough of a built-in foundation to ensure the success as we did, enter into the product lens. So it was always part of the plan, the timeline, which have not gotten timelines right in this space of how long, it's really taken to mature into the brand play and the CPG play that, I've always believed, and many people believe that this is. And I should just say, it's not something super unique that we created in terms of this community first approach to building brands. If you look at other CPG plays, you look at Glossier, which is a really popular beauty brand, that was their exact playbook. Emily Weiss had a really popular blog, created community, captured a lot of first party data to really understand what that community wanted, and that informed what became the CPG company that we know today, Glossier. So that's essentially the playbook that we took at Miss Grass.
And that sounds like there was some influence of your entertainment days and understanding of media and understanding of branding that has been pervasive and filtered through to Miss Grass. And then you said you had the URL, Miss Grass. Did you ever have a moment where you weren't, because you obviously had this epiphany, in 2008, way back, of Miss Grass, you bought the URL. That brand, as you carried it forward, obviously it was living inside you for 10 years before you actually launched it. Did you ever have a moment where that you felt that, because it is a female oriented brand, right? I think most of your demographic leans female. Did you ever have a moment in that where you said, okay, is it too narrow? Am I too focused on female when I need to broaden the reach? Or is it always been kind of as part of this, is what you want the brand to stand for, right? What is the ethos of the brand, I guess is the way to answer that.
Yeah, first of all, great question, and one that I get asked a lot, in particular in kind of investor conversations. I always get asked, have you ever thought about buying Mr. Grass? And first and foremost, Miss Grass is not meant to exclusively be for women. There are many males who are part of our community. However, the plant that we all celebrate and consume is a female plant. I don't think there's ever been a case where there's been people asking a Jungle Boys, hey, have you ever thought about it being a little bit too narrow to the male consumer? We represent the ethos of inclusivity and being unapologetically yourself. And especially in this space, historically, we all know that stoner bro stigma, bro is in that name. this space has leaned so heavily towards the masculinity, and we at Miss Grass feel there needs to be a brand, and it's not just us, there are incredible other brands that I think cater to, more of the femininity. And when I say femininity, I mean that energy, not necessarily like the female consumer. And that's what we represent, like consumers who, have historically not really been catered to, and have historically also had a really authentic and deep love and relationship for this plant. And yes, the large portion of our community are women. 76% of our owned brand channels, meaning our social site and email, are female consumers. So, we definitely do cater and over-index in female community members. And frankly, I would say like I would just say like that's the opportunity too. I mean, women are 42% of legal consumers today, and the fastest growing demographic across every single legal market. So I also feel, there's a big enough, even if we were exclusively for women, which again, we are not, there are a lot of men who are part of our community, and there's a big enough consumer base, even if we were just targeting that.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the media evolution and actually the content. So when at the beginning it was a platform, it was designed to create community, and understand and learn. At this point, you've obviously learned a ton, and you slowly made a pivot to product. But what is the media, I guess, strategy right now? I mean, if you've kind of backed off a little bit about the platform, it seems like it's maybe narrowed on almost on a per market activation basis. Like you've taken this broad platform and you've narrowed it down to use it surgically to open new markets, to bring in new customers. Or the title of this webinar is creating customer-driven demand, right? Yeah. So talk a little bit about the evolution of the content and how you've utilized it to drive your business today.
Yeah, so correct. It's very much evolved and changed since we launched product, and our focus, became focused on making sure that the success of our product in the individual markets that, we have launched do perform. And again, we use this kind of like media platform in our community as like an engine for our success. Going into markets, it's a big way of identifying what markets we want to get into. We look for that first party data of really understanding like where our community is that we currently don't offer, that don't have access to our products. So, that's a big way for us to prioritize states. Of course, we're looking at, macro like industry data for that as well in those markets where it makes sense, where regulations, are favorable for us to enter, et cetera. But once we do get in, it's a big way for us from day one, we can drive traffic to shops. So, before we even launch a market, we're engaging our community in said market. We're also reaching out to like-minded brands and aligned, tastemakers in that market that might not already be part of our community to engage with during this kind of like pre-launch period. Once we do launch, we engage with many of our community members who have been following the brand for a very long time, who have been asking us to launch in said state for a very long time, and work with them actually as content creators in their own respective way. So, a lot of them will gift product from day one, which they'll go out, they'll show up, they'll purchase Miss Grass product, they'll create reels and push out on their own channels for additional reach, especially in the markets that they live in. These are like micro influencers that a lot of their community are in said market. So that's another way to kind of like amplify and grow the community base in the markets that we're focusing on. And we kind of use that community and market and media engine as a sales tool too, from, partnering with different retailers and, blasting out. We have email addresses, and 90% of our email addresses we have zip codes for. So we have over 100,000 email subscribers. The zip codes allow us to, if we're doing a specific, partnership with Union Square Travel Agency in New York, we can blast out an email to that specific segment of, consumers in a certain mile radius of that store. To give you an example, a recent example of actually in New York, we partnered with a retailer named Days, which is actually nearby. The other retailer I just said also nearby in New York City. And we held hands with them about 2 weeks ago, brought some like-minded brands together for different activations within the shop. And we blasted out to our New York segment on email and posted it on social, and had over 275 community members RSVP. Close to 200 people showed up to the event, and frankly, it was a hang. Like, you can get your nails done in the store and, meet and greet members of the Miss Grass team. And that's really powerful, especially in, really saturated markets where retailers are looking for brands to drive, additional in-store traffic. It becomes a really valuable sales tool for us.
Fascinating. I mean, to customer acquisition is expensive for retailers, and it's competitive, it's cutthroat, and to put together a program that gets 275 people to walk in the door that you've created in partnership with the retailer, but that you've brought through your network and your relationships, and that's phenomenal. I mean, I think that has to make retailers extremely interested in carrying your product, because not only are you dealing with, you're selling in, but you're selling through, right? And that's, I think, where the rubber hits the road is, can you generate sell-through on, and consistently, and to bring 275 people to the table in one event is phenomenal. How does that how do you keep scaling that? How does that, is this rinse repeat? How do you because these people obviously have an emotional connection to Miss Grass. They came from an email they received, or IG, or whatever it was. How do you keep scaling that emotional connection with the brand? What do you do? What are the tricks to continue to ramp up that following base?
Yeah, so I mean, it's evolved in terms of like community growth tactics over the years, especially now that we, operate and have product in certain markets. Historically, a lot of our community members came through our site, and from our site, they're reading articles, they're, engaging with our content, and then they're converting to our email subscriber list, all kind of through a digital channel, which now, like, a lot of the community that we, community customer acquisition comes from actually like local in-market events and in store, like all of our visual merchandising in store. We have, table tents that have QR codes that, people can sign up to be a part of our community through that, which we gain a lot of community growth through. And then we do a lot of, I would say, like, partnerships have been so core to like who we are and how we built this brand from day one. They've obviously evolved and look a lot different, and a lot of our partnerships now are with our retail partners, where like early days we were, held hands with Beats by Dre and put together like a series for women in wellness, a dinner series with them. We have done events and still do events all over, the country at Soho houses, and we did a partnership with Lululemon, and all of those have been able to like leverage like-minded brands that have communities that kind of overlap with ours in terms of the psychographics of that community. And it's allowed us to kind of like grow ours by leveraging a larger or a different community base to introduce, the Miss Grass brand and ethos and mission and what we stand for. Today, to give you kind of another example of a way that we've, continue to grow community, and actually this one translates to and into, great sales success. We, at the end of last year, had a campaign called Faces of Cannabis. This was also one that was specific to the New York market, although the kind of like reach spanned way beyond it. And the campaign, the mission of the campaign was to really normalize cannabis by showing the true faces of the New York community who had a relationship with this plant and to tell their stories. So we held hands with Union Square Travel Agency for this partnership. We blasted it out on our community platforms, essentially saying like, hey, like, do you live in New York? Do you have a relationship with this plant? And we'd love to feature you. We had 575 applications, and in order to apply, they had to fill in like a Google form that they uploaded photos of themselves. They, told their story as it relates to their relationship with cannabis. We chose 15 individuals to create a photo shoot of in New York, and those photos and their stories lived at a 2-week exhibit at Union Square Travel Agency. USTA has like a store right next to their main store that this lived as an exhibit. So we had an opening day party, but then it was open to the public for 2 weeks. You can go in, and there were images and portraits hanging from the ceiling and all around the walls, and it told these individual stories. So that campaign, it drove a 1,600% increase in sales for us during the campaign length that has sustained itself and USDA. So it really did translate to a great like sales bump, which truly wasn't the main KPI of that event for us. It was community growth, which, as I mentioned, we gained close to 1,000 new subscribers from that campaign, from people who actually applied, engaged with us, and further, the 15 people that we actually chose to be featured in that campaign. I mean, you look at their Instagrams today, it's still the image, like their profile image is the image of from the campaign. They are like, so loyal and engaged, authentic ambassadors of Miss Grass and what we represent. So that was also something special that I don't think going into it I really realized that would happen. But these are still some of our like most engaged community members, just having been a part of that campaign for us.
As you're talking, I have this image of like the classic funnel of like where you do a broad marketing campaign all across the U.S. and you start to narrow that down as people go through the funnel and become out the other end, they become a community member or a client or a customer, what have you. You're actually doing it. You might have started that way years ago, but you're actually doing it the reverse way. You're starting on a micro community level. You're talking about getting, whatever, people in the door of a dispensary, probably bringing their friends, creating kind of programs that make them quasi celebrities, right? And then you're using it, you're building community one person at a time. She tells two friends, she tells two friends, right? And you're adding value and doing innovative programs with retailers that not only bring 275, what have you, people in the door, but also kind of the network effect, right? Of having those 275 have 5 friends, and all of a sudden you're 1,000, and math's off a little there, but you're really doing it at a kind of a one-to-one basis where you're creating this relationship with individuals that then become brand ambassadors, right? So you have these, I guess you're creating influencers from somebody that would never have considered themselves to be an influencer.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I think it's really important in our space. I mean, we can't just take out a meta ad and reach X amount of users. Like it's how, as a cannabis brand, you kind of need to grow is through these really organic, and not to mention it's way more cost effective to do it this way too, but it's through this through these organic marketing programs and tactics, and it results in really loyal community members. And I think that it takes time to build brand. Like, we are 6.5 years in, and I would say there's very few brands in this space that have true like brand equity and IP value and substance behind them, and they represent something, and they have a community, and there's definitely those exist in cannabis, but not a ton, I would say. And I think that we're now starting to kind of enter, and we're in early innings of it, but like we really are in like the brand era of weed. And I think that those true brands who have that loyal community, and it stems from like what you were saying, this like core group of like really dedicated and loyal followers who, over time it's like slowly grown. We have close to 100,000 social following on Instagram, 105,000 email subscribers. And, for the cannabis space, that's actually quite a large following, given those have all grown through organic means.
So your part of the strategy obviously is to partner with a retailer and say, hey, I have some really innovative activation plans. I can bring consumers into your store, so I'm helping with your customer acquisition. So they're down with that. But then I imagine once these events actually happen, like we all know that the owner of the retail shop is an important person, the buyer, of course, but really where the rubber hits the road is these bud tenders, right? That need to, they're always asked for recommendations. And how do you get them to be top of mind to promote Miss Grass versus another brand? I imagine there's a correlation when they see you're doing these in-store activations, the success, you're seeing the enthusiasm and the excitement of that person that you're making famous, that is just so fired up about what's going on. It makes it really easy for the bud tender to say, I want to be a part of that too. Like, this is a culture I want to ride with. I mean, have you seen that correlation with the actual bud tenders and recommendations, and how this kind of impacts them? Because people are always trying to get to those bud tenders to get them to be top of mind. But this is a great way to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we definitely have seen that. And we focus a lot on engaging with bud tenders. We have an event franchise called Burn and Learn, and we do this in all of our markets. And it's an event that is specific for bud tenders, where we invite, bud tenders across the market, or specific to like, chains, like a specific account. And we'll bring them outside of the traditional like staff training in store, where it's a little bit like stale. We'll bring like lunch in there, but we can't actually like engage and consume, and they're at their place of work. This is like outside of their work. We, rent a place or a venue that allows consumption, and it's a hang, like it's part educational. Like we'll hit on the certain, 3 to 5 like takeaways that we want bud tenders to know about our brand, so that they can easily kind of like be shepherds of that for us to customers in their store. But really, it's a time for us to like celebrate them. And bud tenders are some of the most truly authentic consumers in this industry. Like, they have such a deep love and connection with this plant, and frankly, they know more about cannabis than a lot of the buyers and executives do. Of course, there's exceptions for sure. So it's a great way for us to engage with bud tenders. And we've seen, when we do these learn and burns, the uptick in our sales following that learn and burn is massive. Another example would be, we had a Miss Grass throne, and we still have it. It's like on tour right now, that we partnered with a retailer, and we partnered with an artist who created a giant throne, like a giant chair made out of our Miss Grass mini boxes. So I don't even know how many mini boxes she must have used, but it was just this giant chair that we had in a retail store that now is like on its 5th store. Like, this chair is like on tour. It's now in Happy Days in Long Island, but it's gone through Jersey and some New York stores. And it's a UGC campaign too, where we drive our community to the store to take images of themselves on this giant throne, and we ultimately choose, the best kind of image that they win a giant like Miss Grass gift prize per store. But what we've seen, not only is it a great like tool to drive in-store traffic, it's such an incredible tool to engage with the staff at that store. To talk about the store that it's in right now, Happy Days in Long Island, it just got there like 2 days ago, and the first day it got there, Happy Days posted this like incredible like reel on Instagram of all of their staff taking images on the chair. So, you know, even without us physically like being in the door and engaging from on a personal level, we have this like giant throne activation that like they're engaging with our brand without us even being there. And, you know, that's really powerful. And we've seen that translate into sales too.
Passionate about the brand. I mean, so cool. I've just not heard this. Awesome. So how does this, so what's the setup? So let's say there's a new state number 8. You go into there, you go into the state. Let's start with A, what are you looking for in a partner? And then we'll follow up with B, how do you convince the retailers that this is, you know, how do you kind of connect with the retailers at scale to be able to do these programs? But let's start with partner selection. And let's actually start even before that. Let's go back and be like, how do you decide where to go? Like, do you look at your user base and be like, geez, we have 100,000 people and 8,000 people are in this state. We're not in that state. We should go there. But actually, you start. How do you decide where to go? What data do you look at?
So twofold. First party data from a how do we decide what state to go in? We look at first party data. So exactly what you said. We look at the community base that we own, see, you know, where our like largest cohorts are in the markets that we're not serving. And then we also look at, you know, third party data. And we have internally, we have what's called like a state matrix. And essentially it's where we capture a ton of data on individual markets. So we have all 50 states lined up in each in a column, and we have like the market size, like the 2023 market size of that market, how many 21 plus residents in the state, how many dispensaries in that state, which breaks out to how many residents per dispensary, the CAGR per market, not only like historic actual, but projected for the next couple of years to understand like where there are like high growth markets. We're looking at like market saturation, like how many brands are participating in the market, how many operators. We're looking at the biomass, so like what's bulk wholesale price right now of flower in that market to try to understand like where the pricing economics are. Those are just a few, but we capture a ton of metrics along in per market, which essentially helps us identify what markets to get into. And right now we're focused on high growth markets and you know, markets that have a little bit of a higher barrier to entry, which allows us to, you know, like a New Jersey market, we got in quite early in a nascent market. I'm a Jersey girl. We have a strong following in Jersey. So, you know, it was an authentic market for us to get into and kind of like brought it back home. But kind of Jersey had like a really good makeup of like a state that we look for and the timing that we try to enter into that market. Once we've identified, okay, we want to get into X state, we then go in and really, you know, diligence the operators that exist today. So, you know, from a cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution perspective, the majority of our markets, that's one partner that we partner with that handles cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution. And in a certain market like a California, we kind of like stack it where our cultivator and manufacturer, we then move it to a different distributor. And we look for a number of different things. Like first and foremost, I know it sounds cliche, but like they need to be good human beings that align with the mission of Miss Grass and the ethos and what we stand for. So that's for one that we look for. Two, we look for operators that are exceptional at their craft. Like we are not cultivators and we're not manufacturers. We're not a distribution company. We are incredible at building brand and marketing and a sales engine. And we look to hold hands with the most incredible growers in the market. So from a product quality perspective, we make sure that that's there. And someone that like is, you know, kind of like acknowledges their strengths and their, don't want to say weaknesses, but things that they're not as strong at, so that like it's a true like mutual win-win relationship where they know, you know, we're great growers, but like we're not exceptional at like building brands, and by holding hands with Miss Grass, like we provide that to them. So it really, we make sure that the like mutual value creation is there, because ultimately for a successful partnership in the long run, like that needs to be there. Yeah, so that's kind
Just
of
real quick on that. I just there's a question that I'm asked all the time, and that is, you move into a new state. Is it better to partner with a co-packer that's not going to compete with you, or partner with a vertically? I mean, you're in Arizona right now. Most of the licenses there are vertically integrated, so the partner might be another brand. Where does that? Is there a friction in that, or do you actually like working with companies that have brands? Or what has been your experience of co-packer with no brand versus a brand partner that might be complementary, not competitive, or maybe competitive, but how does that dynamic play out for you?
It's a great question. I think that there's pros and cons of both. Ultimately, operators that have an existing owned brand portfolio, they have logistically figured out, the wholesale market, and they've logistically figured out, seamlessly distributing to said doors. So there's less of like needing to kind of create this like new expertise together that they haven't already been doing. So we found that plugging into an operator that does currently like wholesale in the market, it's more of a like seamless integration into that. Ultimately, like who we cater to and our brand, we do make sure that it fits when you're looking at the like portfolio of brands that our partner might, be involved in, some fully owned by them and some, third party, such as a Miss Grass relationship. Like none of our supply chain partners in any of the 6 markets like own a piece of Miss Grass. Like we are a fully independent brand that we hold hands with operators in these states. We do, of course, make sure that we feel we fit a certain, gap in their portfolio, and we're not like exactly competing with something, because that can obviously get tricky. And we just want to make sure like incentives are aligned with our operating partner, especially as we're like looking for allocation of canopy and getting enough production to meet the demand in that market. So it's definitely something that we consider. But I do feel strongly that our brand is unique and differentiated, and we're serving, even if our operating partner has pre-rolls, which many do, like we're serving a different consumer base, and we've seen that we can still perform really well in those cases.
We're going to jump in and talk about a couple other topics, but before we go, in terms of the partnering model, we always like to ask, since this is DeepRoots, we're taking a deep dive. What experiences have you had that with the relationship or the mechanics of the relationship that you learned from that, maybe because it didn't work out? Like what are the hard lessons you've learned in this approach?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I just laugh because it's like the cannabis industry can be, chaotic, and it's just, yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is and no shade to this operator, and this is public knowledge now, but we were in relationship with a group in the Nevada market, which we've since paused because our operating partner went out of business. And they were just not running a financially stable business, like unfortunately a lot of operators in this market. So that's something that, and I don't know, I obviously don't work outside of cannabis, but I would imagine when looking at co-packers and other CPG and things, like there's ways to like credit check, where like it's harder in this industry, where like I find now going into new markets, like that's almost the first thing I try to diligence is like, what does their balance sheet look like? Like, are they going to be stable and be able to pay us and stay in business? And, so that was something that early days, Nevada was our first market outside of California. And I was really excited to, and they were great partners to us and great human beings. And it's unfortunate, that it's devastating for them, I realize. But yeah, that was something that we didn't diligence as hard at the beginning, of like how financially stable and making sure that like we were on top of AR. Like now we don't go a month without, like, at the end of every month, we like are diligencing all of our AR, and we have AR holds on any single retailer, and of course our supply chain partner, but like any retailer that has an open balance, like we cannot continue to market to them. So it was a good learning, and we've now implemented the right like internal structures and processes that we won't be in that position again. But it was a painful learning that we had to go through.
There's no playbook in this industry, right? It can be crazy. We've got some great stories about that, but very thoughtful answer. Appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about just CPG, because you come at it from the world of entertainment, and that applies so much to what we're doing in the lifestyle brand that you're creating. Talk to me a little bit about just cannabis as a CPG. Is it a CPG, or how do you think about your core is flower, right? And so there'll never be a McDonald's flower, scenario, right? Because strains or terps or whatever, how do you look at CPG relative to cannabis?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I would say like we built the IP of Miss Grass around what we stand for, not around a product category. So I know that there are many brands that this is a vape brand, you know what I mean? Where Miss Grass, I hope this is perceived by our community members, but like, we're a brand that stands for so much more beyond the pre-roll market that we operate in right now. So, we will be expanding our product portfolio beyond flower and pre-rolls. Like we are not just a pre-roll brand. It is the top preference of our community members in terms of like what they're consuming, but a very close second is an edible, for instance. And we know this data from having, first person relationship with that. But even in the flower and the pre-roll category, how we've tried to create consistency, which is obviously a term that you would hear and a lot in like a traditional CPG industry, is like when you're having a Coca-Cola, although the bottled Coke and the canned Coke does taste a little bit different, but like for the most part, like it's a consistent product no matter where you're having a Coca-Cola around the world. And for us, we're really terp focused. So our Miss Grass minis, which are our mini packs of pre-rolled joints, they come in fast times, quiet times, and all times. And we have those 3 SKUs in all 6 of our markets. How we kind of create consistency, and to your point, we're dealing with a plant, so it's not going to be down to the like molecular compound level, but we get from our cultivation partner, we get a lot of markets, we bring over our own genetics, but regardless, we get COAs of all of the strains that we have access to. The COAs essentially are lab tests that get full panel tested, so cannabinoids and terps. And we're selecting the strains, and a lot of times we're blending 2 strains together to get a consistent terpene profile that we look for in our fast times versus all times versus quiet times. That way, when you're smoking a fast times in Jersey or smoking a fast times in California, the effect of that high for you will feel somewhat consistent. So that's how we create consistency around our pre-rolls.
It's funny, you just answered the question. A really good question came in from the audience saying, does Miss Grass have specific strains that match product experience and branding? And you just answered that question. You're a savant. But I mean, I think that's really fascinating that you can look at something that is ever changing, the plant, even the top of the plant, or the bottom of the plant, whatever, like it's a different experience, the smalls, whatever it is. And you have no choice. I'm assuming that you have to, like, yes, you're taking to the COAs, you're taking data, but you can't say before your partner that you trust and believe in and understands your brand launches a pre-roll in a market, you're not really able to check and see if you or anyone could do quality control on the product that's about to go on shelves. Or do you? How do you, like, is there a nuance in there where you're like, I got to do the best of my ability to protect my brand? I can't launch something. I mean, we're not talking mold, of course, but we're just talking like flavor or I guess maybe freshness, right? How is it a year old and sitting? So how do you deal with QC and that kind of supply chain dynamic of making sure it represents your brand?
Yeah, and is something that we're constantly improving over here at Miss Grass, and especially improving from I think historically we've been QCing more on like the back end, where in each of our market we have Miss Grass team members in each of the 6 markets that we operate in. And twice a month, they purchase a whole suite of our products and QC it. But at that point, like that product's already on the shelf, So if something is wrong with it, it's kind of like, well, that production batch is fucked, sorry, excuse my language. But, so now we're trying to move up the QC along the supply chain. So we have bi-weekly calls with our supply chain partner, their production calls. Our chief product officer on our end is the point person for them, who also quarterly goes around to all of our markets and visits the cultivation and manufacturing team, so gets eyes on it. Of course, it's quarterly, like we're running multiple productions a month, so she's not getting eyes on every single production batch. But going in further, the COA results are no product is put in, like no flower product is put into a Miss Grass product until our chief product officer's name is Tiana, until Tiana signs off on the COA. So granted, it's a lab result, but like it tells us the terp profile, it tells us the terp percentages, the cannabinoid profile, the THC potency, which sadly it's still what every the majority of consumers look for, is what's the highest THC in this. So there's thresholds that we make sure that like we're not putting a 16% THC flower into our pre-rolls. I know some consumers might want that, but not the majority of who's driving the market right now. So it's approved. The COAs are approved by Tiana. We have bi-weekly production calls with our supply chain partner. That also not only like talks about like what's happening to date, how are we refining and optimizing our production processes to avoid, all types of things that we catch, but two, like what's coming ahead. Like we get eyes on, genetics that are about to be planted, different machines that are coming so that we can optimize and increase, yields on this. Honing in on like what's the right cone bender to reduce our cone loss from 8% to 2%, or all things kind of like we hit on this bi-weekly call. And then like I said, we kind of do the like secret shopping at the end with the team in the market who purchases our product, consumes it, making sure it smokes well, it's flavorful, it's the joints are all lined up, they're packaged correctly. And a lot of times we do find things on that secret shopping perspective to refine that then gets brought up in the next kind of production call on the forefront to fix it. So it's an ever evolving process, and one that definitely does require a lot of attention.
Thorough and thoughtful, Kate. I want to go a little deeper on that question that the person asked. In the edible space, the rage right now is multiple cannabinoids in whatever you're consuming, right? If it's a gummy, it's 1 to 1 to 1, right? And now we're selling effects, right? Sleep is well documented, calm, relax, whatever, creative. So people are selling effects. Have you where do you think flower resides on that path of, is it saying this certain strain matches this feeling that we're trying to give you in this pre-roll, right? I mean, how far is flower behind the kind of gummy phenomena of effect-based marketing, and how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and you've seen this in some pre-roll and flower brands, including our own, in terms of the Times naming convention that we have, Fast, Quiet, All. I think that the flower product category are moving more and more towards, you know, the terpene profile of said flower to elicit and kind of like debunk the, quite frankly, like very antiquated naming convention historically and still today used in flower, which is like sativa, hybrid, and indica. So I do think, and especially when you talk to bud tenders, I've really felt that shift of like educating consumers more around, hey, like this strain is really high in limonene, so like you're gonna feel that like really uplifting kind of like sativa feel that you would feel despite this being named a hybrid. You know, this is more of a sativa dominant hybrid. So I've felt that shift and seen that shift. It's something that we're really focused on over here at Miss Grass. That being said, like in flower compared to an edible product, which is obviously a manufactured product, it's still hard. Cultivators are not breeding strains in smokable flower that's extracting some of the minor cannabinoids. To give you an example, in California, we have a 1-to-1. We have a 1-to-1 THC to CBD pre-roll. So we have actually 4 minis. One is called Half Times, and it's a 1-to-1. Because in California, there is an abundance of cultivators, and there are a lot of incredible high CBD genetics in that market, where we haven't been able to bring that SKU to any of our other 5 markets because cultivators are just not growing that, because unfortunately it's not what the consumer wants. The consumer, the majority of consumers want just that high THC. It's what sells the most. So they're not using limited space in their cultivation facility to grow a strain that frankly they're going to get less for than they would grow if they were breeding to extract the highest THC. So I still think in flower, like we're kind of a long ways to go before you start seeing, cannabinoid ratios. There are some genetics. There's a group called Phylos that is growing really great THCV genetics that they've, have partnered in a couple of different markets to bring to market. But beyond that, I haven't seen a lot of great quality smokable flower genetics in these markets that are, grown to optimize some of the minor cannabinoids that you've seen in edible and more manufactured products.
Great insight. I feel like all it's left for me to do, I'm learning, but I'm not burning, but it's a little early out here in California. So final question. You are really well positioned for the future of kind of large scale marketing, Facebook, Google AdWords, all this, when advertising kind of extends to these traditional platforms. How do you see, I think I made this comment that like I've spoken with people that said you can manufacture brands, and I'm Diageo and I know how to do this and whatnot. But how do you see the opportunity for you in a world where there are no constraints on marketing and advertising? How do you take this infrastructure that you've built, community, and then play it at a very large scale back to where you started?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, it kind of does bring us back to where we started, where, today our focus in brand building has been more narrowed, given like the fragmented rollout of the cannabis industry being like state to state to state. But when you remove those barriers, and when you think of a world like, in the future of interstate commerce, or, the federal legalization, where we can be doing brand campaigns, which we do now, like we do, national brand campaigns, but have local extensions to them. Like we'll be able to do more of that, where like our energy and emphasis can go, going back to your like funnel analogy before, can go top of the funnel, where we can be creating things that have much larger, awareness and reach beyond the, specific market that we're trying to market and convert. And then that can kind of lead down the funnel to specific local markets and converting at a local level. But I'm excited for those days. when it starts to really feel like a true traditional like CPG industry. And I think we're really well positioned given how we started and truly like how we operate. Like we're marketers and we're brand builders, and right now we have our like one hand behind our back a little bit because of the restrictions that just the regulations provide. But I think when that frees up, we'll be really well positioned to continue to grow and scale this brand on a much larger level than we're doing now.
The last question, is there anything that's like, the big dream of like, if this happened, then I'd say I made it, whether that's ringing the bell on NASDAQ or whatever it may be, seeing your ad plastered, or going to Amsterdam and smoking a Miss Grass? What is any big dreams of things that you'll be like, almost like a bucket list for Miss Grass?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'm a big like visualizer, so I've like visualized a lot of like what it would feel like when this happens. This is not going to sound as big as what you just said, but it would be really meaningful to me. My immediate kind of nucleus family has a strange relationship with weed. Like my brother got arrested for distribution, manufacturing, possession. My dad's been a stoner his whole life. Like my mom absolutely hates cannabis, given what my brother went through. And now, of course, she's come a long way. She has a daughter who is like lives under a cannabis plant. Like I've devoted my whole life to this, but she has never even considered. She's not even close to consuming weed with me. And the day that my mom smokes a joint with me, and a Miss Grass joint, will be a moment that I'm like, okay, we've normalized this plant. We've come a long way, and I'm really excited for that day.
Fantastic. What a great way to end it, Kate. Tremendous. So thoughtful, entertaining, exciting. We wish you all the best at Miss Grass. Thank you so much for coming on the show. So I can't wait I'm going to have to learn and burn here a little bit in the not too distant future. Thanks for joining. Everybody else, thank you all for coming on and watching this. I'm sure you learned a lot. And yes, we will have a next episode late May, and we'll be following up with details on that here imminently. But thank you all for coming. Wishing you a great rest of your Wednesday, and to be continued. Thanks, everybody. Good day.